With this huge upgrade to 6808 Boulder Drive and all the excitement that surrounded this move, there was a bigger situation that gained the attention of not only our congregation, but the nation as well.
I think because of not having that many people that was close to me to have had cancer or go through that whole bout, I was very ignorant to it. So of course, when you hear the word cancer, you immediately think death. And this was back in 1998. So I just remember just falling on my face, begging and pleading, God, no, this absolutely can't happen. I mean, who?
Senior Pastor E.K. Bailey was diagnosed with cancer and was unable to perform his pastoral duties as done in the past because of the terrible illness.
Pastor Bailey actually began introducing the fact that he would plan to choose a successor in 2000 at an elders retreat. It was there where he began to cast a vision to us as elders that he had a vision of retiring. And so in 2002, after he had a bout with cancer, he came back and said, I won't be able to carry this load by myself. I need to find someone that will be an assistant or a co-pastor and also will be my successor. And so Pastor Bailey began to pray, and he began to seek after the person that he wanted to do so. His initial choice felt that God was calling him to remain at his current church. And so then, on a Wednesday afternoon, Pastor Bailey called me to the house, and he said to me that my initial choice has chosen to stay at his current church. And so I've always had a plan B in my mind, and you are my plan B. And you know, when he told me I'm his plan B, I'm looking at him and he's looking at me, and he says, I feel that although you're young, because I was 28 at the time, he says, I feel like I can disciple you, I can invest in you, I can pour into you, and I feel like you have what it takes, and you God has placed you on my heart. And so after he told me, I left the house. He said, go talk to your wife, pray about it, and then come back and let me know what you decide.
It was a Wednesday night. I was on the phone with my best friend, Michonne, and she was recapping her day to me, and I was recapping my day, and I had a call from my husband, and I clicked over, and he was like, what are you doing? I need to talk to you right away. And I was like, I'm on the phone with Michonne, can I call you back? He's like, no, I cannot call you back. I need to talk to you. Pastor Bailey talked to me, and he wants me to be his assistant and his successor. And so immediately I thought, well, no, that can't be, because word on the street is it's going to be another person. And so he was like, just get off the phone with Michonne so I can talk to you. So I got off the phone, and he said that Pastor Bailey had pulled him to the side, it went to lunch, and that there was going to be a church vote on Saturday. And how did I feel about it? And at first I was just really in shock, because I'd already had it in my mind that it was going to be somebody else. And I'd even think in my wildest dreams that he was even in consideration.
And so it really sent us through a time when we were just searching, where we, on one side, I was really honored by the chance to be with him, that God had placed me on his heart. But on the flip side, I also was kind of concerned about all that it would require of me. I had always had a vision and a dream of being a pastor. I always wanted to, but I just never anticipated it happening at that point. I'd only been on staff 2 years, and yet now God was just giving me this great opportunity for me and my family.
The meeting on Saturday, I remember that day specifically, I had a new teacher training. I had to walk some teachers through some training. It was mandatory, I had to be there. And I remember I was telling my husband, he was like, yeah, the church vote. And I remember he was very nervous. And I thought to myself, okay, well, I'll be there after my training. It should only take like a couple of, maybe like an hour or two. It was in Fort Worth. And I said, I should be there pretty soon. And I remember I had Caitlin, and I remember I stopped by the house after my training. I stopped by the house to pick up Caitlin, go to the church, and I really, truly, in my mind, I was thinking, it's gonna be about 20, 30 people there. probably just be the deacons and the elders, you know, a couple of them. When I walked into that sanctuary, first of all, when I walked on the side, I could look through the door, and I just saw tons of people. That whole floor was covered. After he went through everything, and he said, now it's time to vote, and everybody stood up, it was, I was looking too to see who wasn't gonna stand, but everybody stood up, and then Pastor Bailey, everybody cheered, and so on, but it still was like, it just was such a weird, scary moment.
After Pastor Bryan Carter was informed that he would be the new senior pastor of Concord Church, unfortunately, Pastor Bailey's health took a turn for the worst.
I would go by, my dad left the hospital, came back home. He was very adamant, maybe the last week, that he wanted to go home. And my mom and dad, by faith, were getting the house remodeled so that they could have some handicap accessible things to go on in the house when he was going to come back and return to full health. And so the doctors were like, well, who's going to take care of you at home? He was like, do you see all these people? I want to go home. So he indeed came home, and when he came home, I lived in DeSoto, and I would go by the house every morning on my way to work just because I had to put my eyeballs on him. And I remember that morning I went by there. He didn't look good, and it's amazing how God changes your prayers, because the prayer every day when I would see him is, God, let him be right here. Don't let anything happen while I go to work. Let me go to work and come back. But he didn't look good, and he didn't look like himself. And I remember feeling like, I don't want him to stay here if he has to stay in this state. And as much as that would hurt me to give him up, you know, that's not my dad, the man lying there anyway. So I remember I said, I need you to be right here when I get off work, okay? And normally he would go. And that morning I just remember he looked at me, and he just looked at me, and then he like fell back to sleep. And so later on that night, late that night, is when he passed away.
In October of 2003, Pastor Bailey passed, and Bryan Carter became the senior pastor of the Concord Church.
He passed on a Tuesday night. It was late Tuesday night, around the midnight time. That next morning, I was the pastor. As we were walking the members through the hospital, I was the pastor.
I feel really bad for people who never experienced having a father, but when you've had one, and so it was like, if this can end, okay. It was like everything else in life was kind of like, it really doesn't matter. And then you hear the things that you were taught in Sunday school. You hear the things that people said to you. And you feel people praying for you. And then it's like day after day. It's just, you hear people say, if I could just make it through the day. And in 2003 and 2004 was, if I could just make it through today. And I remember coming home, and it would feel like I worked 5 jobs, and I would just get out my shoes, and wherever I would just lay down. And I would just ask God, if you let me do it again tomorrow, I'll do it again. But there were a lot of times that in my own physical strength, I didn't think it was possible to live without my dad.
That was a tough season. Those days, shortly thereafter, to watch someone die of cancer is a terrible thing to see. And so you deal with all the emotions and the pain, and you deal with all that. I was more focused on that than I was on the church and everything else. And God just gave grace to be able to lead our church. We went through a season of 30 days of grieving, because over in Exodus it talks about how when Moses died, the people grieved over Moses. So that's what we did as a church. We put a black ribbon on his chair where he sat in the pulpit, and we grieved, and we taught on grieving, and we helped to process our grief, and we celebrated. We celebrated the incredible gift that God had given to us for 28.5 years as our pastor, and that of Pastor E.K. Bailey. The Lord was just faithful. He really was. And even with the apprehension about what could happen and how would all these things work out, I didn't really think about that. what I focused on was honoring my pastor, honoring God, and giving the best that I have, because I just believe that if God brings you to it, if God calls you, He qualifies you, that God has an awesome way of doing what He wants to do in all of our lives.
Here's what's coming up next.
I'm blown away. It has been a phenomenal ride.
And we'll be right back after this